Good morning and welcome to the National Newspaper Publishers Association's Let It Be Known. It is Monday, July 18th, 2022. Time is flying. The Southern Prisons Coalition, a group of civil and human rights organizations, submitted a new report to the United Nations Committee on the Elimination of All Forms of Racial Discrimination on the devastating consequences of incarceration on Black people throughout the southern United States. We discussed that this morning. Also, a federal judge is siding with the Sun Prairie School District in Wisconsin in a lawsuit filed by two Black parents who objected to their children's middle school assignment that asked students how they would punish a slave in ancient Mesopotamia. We have details on that as well. And record high inflation has pushed the value of the federal minimum wage down to the lowest level in 66 years, according to a new report from the Economic Policy Institute. That minimum federal hourly rate of $7.25 per hour is worth less than any time since February 1956. We discussed all that this morning and more with Barrington Salmon, uh, NMPA journalist Barrington Salmon, and James Wright of the Washington Informer. See, Barrington is so famous. His name, there's a big pause when I say his name. What's up, Barrington?
I'm fine, thank you. How are you?
Barrington, I had the worst oxtails the other day, and I blame you.
Really?
Yeah, because you haven't taken me out for oxtails in a long time, so we got to rectify that.
You know where I live.
No, you've moved since I've seen you.
No, I haven't. You moved, maybe. You know where I live. So anytime you want to come, you may not leave after you eat the oxtail that I'm going to take you to get.
Well, you know what? That's always true. James, good morning, James. James, you got to join us for some oxtails. Listen, the Southern Prisons Coalition, a group of civil and human rights organizations, submitted a new report on Friday afternoon to the United Nations Committee on the Elimination of All Forms of Racial Discrimination. Yeah, there is a committee that is called the Elimination of All Forms of Racial Discrimination at the UN. And they talked about the devastating consequences of incarceration on Black people throughout the southern United States. The long-term goal, they said, of eliminating all forms of racial discrimination in the criminal legal system, including just federal, state, local, all the way around. The report described the widespread disparate harms resulting from the arrest, harsh prison sentence, and incarceration on Black communities. We know this has been a problem forever, Barrington. So this new report, I'm sure it does not surprise, but it does suggest that not only are everyone in power aware of this, but they're not doing anything.
They've always been aware, Stacy. I just saw a story, I think Friday, where some lawmakers in Colorado, I think, were contemplating granting some contract to a new company, a new prison company, and they said that one of the provisions is that in order for them to sign the contract, they have to have 90% of the beds filled, and this is in an area where they said that the number of beds have been, all these beds that are open, they have, I think, like they said, like 5,000 beds out of like 11 or 12,000 are open, but yet they're saying that that they're contemplating signing this thing. It's a money making venture, and it is a means for them to continue to use free labor, because one of the things that I look at and think about all the time is that they claim that people are free, that Black people are free in this country, but the reality is that they use the criminal justice system and other punitive penal measures to pull people out of society and keep them locked away, pay them 4 cents an hour, if that, for the work, and making billions of dollars for the so-called criminal justice system, because they're using, all these businesses in the United States are using this free labor.
Yeah, and James, we see that obviously prison is the very definition of big business. We know about we've done reports so many times on phone calls from prison, how much that costs folks, just how the wear and tear on the families. But and we're not even even talking about that. What this report is talking about is how blacks are punished in the criminal justice system. So all the way around, James, there is major implications to this prison pipeline that the United States has, and so what. I know in DC you have a jail there. You don't have a state prison or anything like that. But James, what have you found in your reporting about how bad this affects African Americans in particular?
Well, one particular fact that we should grapple with is the fact that the state of Mississippi, since its inception, has never had a prison population that was a majority black. So we're talking about a policy officially and unofficially, which is designed to incarcerate black people. Even in a state where you have a smaller black population, such as Arkansas, you have the majority of prisoners there as black. So we're dealing with systemic racism, we're dealing with intentional racism, and we're dealing with policies that are overt and covert. The thing about it is, Stacey, and what makes this so sad is that a lot of folks don't see this as a problem in the South. They see
Mhm.
it that is just the way it is. Whether you have a Democratic governor or a Republican governor, they see the prison system being majority black is just the way things are. And as Barrington alluded to, big businesses are benefiting from this. And so, and particularly, you're talking about it in the South because that's more agricultural. Especially except within the last 10 years, and then industrial. So therefore, they're able to have these labor camps and slave labor, those chain gangs, in order to do the work that should be done by public servants and people who work in the fields. So this is nothing new. I don't know. I hope this works with the UN. I don't know what the UN can do about anything, but we'll just
Yeah.
have to see.
Yeah, on August 8th, the UN plans to review the United States' compliance with the International Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Racial Discrimination for the first time since 2014. But going back to what you said about Mississippi, we know the infamous Parchment Prison is there. And Parchment, Jay-Z and Yo Gotti have, for the last several years, been suing the state of Mississippi. They want to see Parchment Prison closed. The conditions there are simply the worst that you could even imagine. We did a story at Black Press USA about 2 years ago that really identified some of the real egregious problems. I mean, the food that they serve the inmates are often spoiled and they're months old, past the expiration date. They're jamming them into cells. In some cases, 10, 12 to a cell. And cells are really small, and among other things, the mold problems there. And Barrington, Parchment Prison actually is built where they used to house slaves anyway. So it's so interesting
Yeah.
that we talk about that.
The thing that I'm assuming that maybe a lot of the public don't know is that, as you said, there are 2.3 million people in behind bars in the United States, the most in the world, even though China and India have 1 billion people. They have much less people. Um, prison rights advocates, social justice advocates have been fighting forever to try to get them to improve the conditions. I've said it before, racism and discrimination is a shapeshifter, because whenever you point out, whenever you agitate for change, when they're forced to, when they're pressured to, they'll begin to, or they'll verbalize that they're gonna make some changes, and then when you turn away, they're going back to regular business as usual. I have no confidence that anything that the United Nations does will be more than a report that will go on a shelf, because they're supposed to be the international body that polices in a lot of ways the behavior of countries. They're afraid of the United States. They Russia and China ignore them. They do these countries, the big countries with the resources and the numbers, they do what they want. So I don't imagine that the UN officials are going to come to Biden and say you have to, and that Biden's going to pay them any money. I know it's not Biden's problem. It's a systemic problem that is all over the country. One thing I would say, James talked about Mississippi, and as egregious and crazy and funky as it is in Mississippi, you go to Missouri, you go to Ohio, you go to Rikers Island in New York.
Oh gosh, yeah.
They're doing the same thing. I saw a report not long ago where they were saying that they have thousands of New Yorkers and God knows how many others in other parts of the country who, because they can't afford bail, they're stuck in prison.
Yes.
No charges,
Yeah.
no nothing, and they're stuck. That's what happened to I can't remember his first name, Browder, the young man that Jay-Z did the documentary on.
Yep.
They said that they claimed that they thought he had stolen a backpack, and he spent like 3 years in solitary confinement waiting for a trial that never came. And when he came out, he committed suicide because, you know, the things that they did to him when he was in there, he just couldn't take. I mean, it is aggravating and frustrating to, you know, because we in our business, we see and we talk to people who are on the ground who know the reality of the harshness and the brutality of the prison system, and most people aren't aware, and those that are aware don't care, and the politicians don't care. The politicians don't care.
Yeah, not at all. And among the ongoing stark racial disparities throughout prisons in the southern United States, in particular, Black people are 5 times more likely to be incarcerated in state prisons in states like Alabama, Arkansas, Florida, Georgia, Louisiana, Mississippi, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Texas, where Black communities comprise 38% of the total population. Black individuals account for as much as 67% of the total incarceration population. And also, while incarcerated, Black people are more than 8 times likely to be placed in, as you said, Barrington, solitary confinement, and they are 10 times more likely to be held there for exceedingly long periods of time. It's a major problem that we've talked about, we continue to talk about, but as you said, Barrington, nobody is going to do or has done anything about it. James, these are some really stunning numbers.
Yes, they are. And let me say one of the problems with that is that, and let's just break this down individually, Stacey and Barrington, ineffective assistance of counsel. A lot of times when somebody is Black and they're arrested in these states, instead of getting the ability or the chance to exercise their full constitutional rights in terms of being charged with a crime, et cetera, what happens is the system tells them to plead.
Yeah.
And even though they didn't commit a crime, because if you plead, the judge will be easier on you, and then you can, move on. And then they find out that's a canard, and then they end up in prison. And we both, and everybody today knows that if a white person was charged with a crime and a Black person is charged with a crime in those southern United States, in those southern states, we do know that the Black person will get the harsher sentence. And that's really why, because ineffective assistance of counsel, the system is rigged against a lot of those Black folks who are poor and can't really afford good attorneys. So that's the situation that we have to face, but we don't talk about that as much, though.
I just want to say, Stace, we would be remiss if we didn't acknowledge the work of prison reformers, prison abolitionists, and a host of other groups. I would never want to say that people aren't doing anything. I would say that those in the best position, those with the most power, the governors, the legislators, they're the ones that aren't doing anything, or you have too few of them to make an enough of an effort. But I talked to color of change folks, the Sentencing Project. You have a number of organizations,
The
and
Bell Project. I don't know if many people are aware of them too.
the Marshall
Great work
Project.
they're doing. Yep.
Yeah. So you have some folks who are doing great work. But the thing is that in my mind, until you have a tipping point in this country of people who are going to force those people that claim to work for us to do it, it won't change. And the thing is that the clearest example of all of this is the aftermath of George Floyd, when you had millions of people on the street, when you had folks agitating and demanding for change. And what happened? The conservative forces and the people that defend the status quo, they started saying, "Oh, defund the police is a bad thing, and we have more crime. What are we going to do?" So they lied about what the prison abolitionists and the prison reformers are talking about, because they weren't necessarily talking about get rid of every police department and leave people to have to deal with crime on their own. The New York City Police Department gets $10 billion a year. $10 billion a year. And you have police officers who are social workers, teachers, and doing a whole bunch of things that they don't need to be doing. All the defunders were saying, the defund people were saying, take a portion of that, put the money in for mental health, for affordable housing, find psychologists and counselors to go to do wellness checks, for example. Because look, every time you pick up the paper, some cops go to do a wellness check and they kill somebody who is having a mental health crisis.
And Barrington, and that's a great point. And it really, Randy Morrison writes in that China has more disciplined citizenry. America does not. And he talks about respect. Well, it's really hard to have that respect when, as Barrington just said, just brought out, and it's really hard to have that respect when Jalen Walker in Akron, Ohio, unarmed, running away, is shot at 90 times. It's really hard to have that respect when George Floyd has a knee in his neck for 9.5 minutes. It's hard to have that respect when 14 or 12-year-old Tamir Rice is gunned down on the playground in Cleveland. And we can go on and on and on. So, we're not missing it, young man. We are certainly dead on that when it comes to respect. It's a two-way street.
Yeah. And the thing that's interesting, Stace, is that we constantly have this dichotomy. Even today, folks are like, if you all respected the police, they wouldn't shoot you. That's garbage.
No, please.
That's garbage. Yeah. If the police got more, no, it's not more training. No, it's not. They see us as a threat. They claim that they're afraid of us, and Black communities, non-white communities are still over-policed because the original aim of the police departments was to monitor and control our communities.
Mm-hmm. Well, the first police department in Boston was started. Why? It was to track down slaves. We got to move on. We can go more into that. But speaking of tracking down slaves, a federal judge is siding with the Sun Prairie School District in a lawsuit filed by 2 Black parents who objected to their children's middle school assignment that asked students how they would punish a slave in ancient Mesopotamia. The judge threw this lawsuit out, but this was, if you recall when this happened in 2021, I mean, it was so hideous. This wasn't a part of the curriculum. This was not in any assignments. The teacher decided that this teacher wanted to know what it was like. He wanted this Black kid. He assigned this Black kid a Black History Month project.
Mm-hmm.
to discuss how a slave would be punished in ancient Mesopotamia. What do you do with that?
Well, one of the things I think we're learning again, gentlemen, is that the institutions that had in the past, not all the time, but generally in the past, had defended our interests can no longer be depended on. The courts, most of the courts, they, starting with the Supreme Court and coming on down, they're weaponizing education. They are giving these folks, these teachers, the leeway to do the types of things that we're seeing. This is not the first case that I've seen where assignments have been made that are racist. It's the first one that I recall recently that has gone to trial, because most of the time the school districts are the ones trying to work it out. What do you do? Because once a judge has sided with them, you don't really have any recourse.
Mm-hmm.
So, but this is the reality we're dealing with, and I mean, we're going to be seeing more of this as the right wing, anti-critical race theory crowd do everything they can to rig the educational system to ensure that that they don't teach true history. I would encourage you and our viewers and listeners to check out. I saw it last night. Jeffrey Robinson, who's a noted civil rights attorney, has this great presentation, like a documentary, talking about the discrimination and racism that is completely embedded in every aspect of American life, and how folks keep on saying, "This is not America. This is not who they are." Yeah, it is.
Yeah. Well, James, the record high inflation has pushed the value of the federal minimum wage down to the lowest level in 66 years, according to the Economic Policy Institute. The minimum federal hourly rate is, of course, $7.25 per hour, but is now worth less than any time since February 1956. What's going on here, James?
Well, I did want to make a quick comment in terms of that school assignment to say Mesopotamia, slavery then, and slavery with the United States were two totally different institutions.
Yep.
It was far more humane in Mesopotamia as opposed to over here. But to your point about the minimum wage, which has the roots in slavery, sort of in a vicarious sort of way, this takes me back, Stacey, with the quote that you just had. You talked about when Ronald Reagan, when he was running for president in 1980, proposed a sub-minimum wage for teenagers. In other words, if a teenager was working as a cook at McDonald's and an adult was working as a cook at McDonald's, the teenager would make less money, even though they're doing the same level of work, because Mr. Reagan felt that the adult was more valuable than the teenager. And, the business community, Stacey, in Barrington has never really liked the minimum wage. As a matter of fact, they punished Franklin Roosevelt. They didn't like Franklin Roosevelt when he supported that back in the 1930s. So there's always been this push to keep the minimum wage at a minimum as much as possible. And so this is just a part of that decades-long fight to keep the minimum wage as small as possible, to get as much labor out of people and to increase profits. So this doesn't surprise me at all. And inflation only makes it worse.
Yeah, and people have fought. There are certain people who have fought for $15 per hour minimum wage. They've been fighting for that for years. You really, at this stage, you probably need, especially if you have a family of 4, you need about at least $25 to $30 an hour. Barrington, but here's the thing, though. The federal minimum wage in 1956 was 75 cents an hour, right? But it's equivalent. That's equivalent to $7.19 today.
Yeah.
And the minimum wage is $7.25.
Yeah. The thing that when you put it in perspective, I saw a story a couple of days ago saying that U.S. CEOs and executives make 631 times what their workers make. right? These guys are getting multi-million dollar packages, bonuses, and all of these other perks. And, yo, bruh, I used to joke back in the day that if we weren't careful, capitalists would take us back to serfdom. That's what they're doing. That's what they're doing. I mean, there hasn't been an increase. The Republicans have refused to support an increase in the minimum wage, and they've been in this place for the past 40 years, right? I continue to argue that Bernie Sanders, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and those folks, they have the right idea, because this duopoly, this monopoly of politics by the Democrats and Republicans, it serves nobody except their overlords, the lobbyists and the corporate types, and Alec and the Koch brothers, because these guys are being financed by these people, because they claim that the Koch brothers are libertarian, and basically the Koch brothers would very much like for nobody in this country to work for a salary, but to basically work for free, unless people, unless folks vote out these Republicans and vote out the Democrats. Because here's the deal: the Democrats have been benefiting from Republicans who come out and hold these positions. Democrats just don't say anything. Right. They support it, right? But they just don't say anything. So the Republicans give them cover. They need to get rid of all of them. Any of them that are not interested in increasing minimum wage, in cutting taxes for the rich, and using that money for all it is. When you look at this country, for example, it's a matter of what the priorities are. Because if they were willing to reallocate money for the middle class and working class people, things would be different. But you have billionaires who made billions of dollars during the pandemic, and who just pay these lobbyists to pay these Congress people to ensure that nothing changes. And they're basically telling, it's like an Ayn Rand scenario where they're telling you sink or swim. Don't expect any help from us.
Yes. The minimum wage the federal minimum wage has not changed since 2009, and it's the longest period it's gone without a change to the minimum wage. And a worker earning the minimum wage today makes 27.5% less than those in 2009, which of course that's adjusted for inflation, or 40% less than in February 1968. And that date marked the historical high point for the minimum wage due to changes enacted by Congress that made it so more industries, particularly those that typically employed Black workers, were covered by the minimum wage pay rate. So Barrington has assessed this very well. We know what the capitalists are doing. We see it every single day. And during the pandemic, we certainly saw it. The banks, those who are already more than just solvent, they were made even more so with the laws that were passed, presumably to help those who were struggling, but it really helped those who were already rich, right?
Right. Yeah. Yes. Because the Fed, the Federal Reserve, they have been putting trillions of dollars a year into the stock market to inflate these companies and make sure they have money. We could use some of those trillions. They gave us that little paltry stimulus package money, and some like Joe Manchin is going to say that's going to encourage people not to work. Someone like him shouldn't even be. I mean,
well, go check out what Bernie Sanders had to say over the weekend about Manchin out of West Virginia. Go look that up. We're out of time. Otherwise, we could bring it up, but maybe we'll talk about it some more later this week. But it was really a scathing assessment of who Senator Joe Manchin really is, and Bernie Sanders was not afraid to say it.
He don't care.
Yeah. Well, he has an agenda of his own, and you know, sometimes power, you know, what was that saying about with great power comes great responsibility, but also when we see those with great power, you know, they only hunger for more power, and they are very destructive with that power. And certainly it appears that Senator Joe Manchin is right there with them. So thank you so much, Barrington. Thanks so much, James. We appreciate all you for watching Let It Be Known. Tune in tomorrow for more Black news and information you can use to start your day. Thanks for joining us.